Hi guys, my name is Ruben from Aerial Drone Solutions, and last time we spoke about the recreational flying or hobby flying of drones in South Africa, and on this episode we'll be focusing on the commercial side of drones in South Africa, specifically relating to licensing and the certifications of the drones regulations in South Africa. And we've got the expert here this morning. His name is Dean Polley from CUWASA, also known as the Commercial Unmanned Aircraft Association of South Africa, to tell us a little bit more. Dean, good day, are you well?
Morning, Ruben, and thank you for inviting me back on your show.
So Dean, last time we spoke about, like I said earlier, about the recreational and also the hobby flying of drones in South Africa. But let's dive into the commercial side of drones in South Africa, and let's start off with the licensing. Tell us a little bit more about the licensing and an RPL. What exactly is an RPL?
So an RPL is the equivalent of a PPL. There's a formal curriculum. It stands for Remote Pilot License. So it's a license that you do in order to legally fly a drone or an unmanned system for commercial gain.
So let's say I've done my RPL and I've got my drone license. I've gone through the whole thing, the theory as well as the practical. Can I now go out and fly commercially in South Africa?
So strictly speaking, no. Just having an RPL on its own is not going to enable you or allow you to do that. You need to operate within a company that's the holder of what's called an ROC, a Remote Operating Certificate. And that's the equivalent of an AOC in manned aviation, so an Aircraft Operating Certificate.
Yes.
So you need to have a formal company established. You need to apply for an Air Services license with the Air Services Licensing Council from the Department of Transport. And then once you've got your ASL, you can then apply for an ROC. And that's quite a long and complex process. So you need the ROC. The pilot that then operates the drone needs to have an RPL, but you need to operate under or with under a operating company that has got an ROC.
Exactly. And that is also not all. I mean, I know there's stuff like you go through the same process. You mentioned earlier that an RPL is pretty much equivalent to or very close to a PPL. And I do believe you need to go through the medical, you need to do your restricted radio. Maybe just elaborate on that a bit.
So yes, the RPL curriculum, it's about a week of theory, and you go through pretty much what you'd go through for a PPL. You need to do a restricted radio license. You need to do an English proficiency test. You need to get a Class 3 now, a Class 3 medical certificate. You do air law. You do things like climate and weather. So it's quite comprehensive. And then from there, you do, I think it's about another week of actual practical flying.
Yeah. And also, what you also need to do further on, where you've got the RPL, you've got your ROC in place, you've got your restricted radio, you've got your medical in place, there's still a lot of stuff that needs to get bought and that you need to use for your commercial operations. I'm thinking about stuff like your fire extinguisher, you'll need to have cones to mark off and all that type of stuff, Dean. And that's very important for commercial operations in South Africa.
Correct. So one of the key documents that a ROC would have is an op spec.
Yes.
And in the op spec, it'll describe the nature of the operations and the equipment that is required. The equipment that's required to operate is quite standard, and that's actually listed in Part 101. So you can go and see what is needed there. So it's like reflector jackets, cones, cordoned off areas, fire extinguishers, etc. The other thing that a ROC holder needs to hold is a third-party liability insurance.
Yes.
That needs to be in place as well.
That's very
important. And then the last thing, which is also very important, is every single drone or aircraft that is to be operated under an ROC needs to have what's called an RLA. The RLA is really the airworthiness of the aircraft, and that it's a letter of approval that's issued from the Civil Aviation Authority.
And that's also important for the people making use of commercial pilots. Please make sure that the drone has been RLA'd, and the way you can see that as well, the drone will have what's called a Zulu Tango registration number on the drone itself, so make sure that you check out for that as well. Lastly, Dean, just before we wrap up, I think it's also important to make mention of, even though you've got your RLA or your RPL and also your RLA drone and also the ROC, you need to have what's called controlled airspace on your radio as well to be able to fly in controlled airspace.
So yes, The flying of a drone in controlled airspace is very clearly defined as well in the regulations. Currently, you need to have the drone fitted with a transponder, and it needs to be at least a Mode C / Mode S transponder. The new transponders that are on the market today are also conforming to the new ADS-B standard. And then you need to put what's called a CAMU application in. So CAMU, that's with ATNS, it's a Central Airspace Management application. So it's a standard form that you get from them, and you pretty much define the parameters of your operation, and the stakeholders will review it and sign it off. It typically takes about 2 days to get something like that done.
And very important, you need to have communication with the tower, either via telephone or, like we said, with the VHF radio that you have, and you need to have that clearly stipulated on your op spec as well, that you are allowed to do that. And again, all the info will be available on the SACAA website. You're more than welcome to click on the link below. We'll have everything available there for you. Dean, thank you. That's it for this episode.
Thank you, Ruben.
We'll be back on the next episode, and we'll focus a little bit more about what can happen to you if you as a company, make use of an illegal drone pilot. What does the regulations say about that, and the laws in South Africa state about that?